Okay, hello, I'm Jason Page. I feel really self-conscious about doing this. A while ago, a couple of months ago, I said I was going to potentially create a couple of videos, something just to show how I create music using SID Tracker, how I do stuff in chip music, things like that. A number of people have asked me over the years about how I make certain instruments, how I create some of the tracks and so on. And just for fun, I thought now's probably the right time to do this sort of thing. So why not? We've probably got a number of things recording. We've got me, the iPad running SIDTracker64, and also a camera that's pointing at the iPad. Okay, so hopefully we can see everything, but I'm obviously not set up to do this. I don't do podcasts and stuff like that, so this can either go horribly wrong, in that case you won't see it anyway, or it could go above average, in that case I might well release it. And yeah, we'll see how it all sounds once I put this video together. So let's start. So why did I use SID Tracker? Well, I used to use things like Sound Monitor back in the 80s. Had a break for about 25 years. Actually, I was laid up in bed after an operation about 5 years ago. Had SID Tracker on my iPad and started playing around with it, and realised that I had quite a few things that I never actually tried or thought I could do better now after a 25-year break of doing chip music, and also for all the things I'd learned in the past from sort of working on many games, doing music for games, writing code for games, audio and so on. So there's a lot of things I thought I could do again if I could be given that chance, and kind of discovered the retro scene and things like SID Tracker and realised I could actually do it again. So that's how we ended up where we are now. So yeah, lots of people have asked this sort of thing. We'll see how it goes. I'll get past this chattery bit first because I know how annoying it is when you read it. When you watch it on YouTube and think, just get to the fun stuff, please. So I'll hurry this through. What I will say is that there's probably far better people out there to do a lot of these things than me. There's probably other tools like Go Tracker, Cheese Cutter and so on. I'm not saying this is the best tool or I'm the best at what I do. It's just something to show, how I do it anyway, using the tools that I use. Again, I've used many different tools over the years, many different programs. They're all great at what they do. I don't think anything's cheating for using something on an iPad compared to maybe using a hex editor as we used to do back in the 80s, or even Go Tracker, something like that, which is a steep learning curve. They all basically do the same thing, and overall it just comes down to how well you use the tool. So yeah, feel free to add comments about how you hate certain things or not, but I don't really care. So quick look around. This is SID Tracker. What we've got loaded in a song here, this is actually Albino 4, is it? Mark Knight's song that I converted over. I don't know by the names. I've called this one TDK. It starts off with various names. It's only when people tell me what they are afterwards that I kind of have to remember which one I'm looking at. So what we've got here, see on this side here, music, 3 tracks. Here's the pattern list over this side. Just scroll up and down. What else have we got? Just click here to go into the instrument editor. There's the instrument, click on there, you get your wavetable. So you get your waveforms down the bottom. And the pitch you can set up here. For each section, that can either be a fixed note or a relative offset. And this marker at the top here is a loop marker, so you can loop things. So pretty much like you can do a Go Tracker and so on, it's just a different interface. Slightly easy to use as far as I'm concerned as well. Don't have to remember all the hex for the various waveforms, which, just makes things that's slightly simpler than it might be. So what we've got here is 3 channels. I normally start mine from 0 to 39, 40 to 79, and 80 up to the top to the 3 channels. So that way every time I have to go down a row, I can just add 1 to each one to start the next clear pattern, for example. You'll see, like on row 5 here, it's got 107, 100 and 9 and things like that. That's basically where I finish the song, go back and then start adding in slight variations and so on. And at that point, I'll use whatever pattern I've got up to and do the next one. Entering numbers here is a right pain because you basically have to hold and scroll left and right, to drag left and right to change the value. You can imagine if you're on pattern 100 and you want to go down to 1, trying to drag left over and over again takes a bit of time to get this all the way down. So, you know, it's not perfect in the interface, but I forget it. I don't use any real-time recording. I don't use any of the drum stuff you can do in here. I just enter everything on the tracks directly. I often just loop patterns over and over, play around with ideas until I get it right, then move on to the next part. That's just the way I work. What I would find as well is that with this interface, I set the pattern length quite early on, make sure I get that right. So in this area here, you can see that the pattern length is set to 32. You can change it here. If you get that wrong and have pattern lengths for 64, then realise you haven't got that granularity you might need. You basically have to rewrite the whole song to get it working into 32. Lots of copy and pasting into new tracks and so on. It takes a lot of time and effort, so trying to get that right as soon as possible is quite important. Another thing is to save often. It does crash sometimes. There's no undo, so yeah, saving often is quite important. Speed wise, again, you get single speed songs. I actually run it at 4 times speed for most of my songs nowadays. Oh look, it's just gone over. It says 201 there for ticks per second. That should be 200. As you can see, pain in the ass to get right. So there you go, 200. So that's 4 times update. What that does give you as well is more control over your tempo, which is quite useful. You get more interesting songs out of it, rather than being limited to certain fixed tempos that you get on single speed. 4 times gives you, well, 4 times the resolution of tempos as well. I also use it because of things like getting better resolution on some of the percussion, especially in claps and things like that, which we'll go through later. Yeah, so what we've got here is, you've heard this one before. So this is Albino 4, as I said before. So one of the things I always normally try and do is have a song that sounds quite basic to start off with, but you just keep building and adding more and more into it to try and make it sound like it's doing more than 3 channels. So by the time you get to step 16 down here, for example, it's already getting quite busy down there if we solo some of those channels. So that's just channel 3 with the bass line, drums and everything all on one channel. So the middle channel has got harp chords and some echoey bits for the melody, and then first channel is just a simple melody. So that's that bit. But then if I go down to, say, I think pattern 30, index 32, you get the same thing, but I also managed to shoehorn in another melody. So it's all about trying to get more and more in there, so fool people and think it's doing more. So if you play back that section, so that's still just doing a melody on channel 1. Again, it's the same kind of thing, it's just makes it sound a lot busier. Again, if we go between 16 and then 32. You know, that's basically what I do. Try and make it just sound like it's doing more and more as we go along. So you ask, how do we go about that? Loves to do filter controls and stuff like that. So this uses 8580 R5 emulation. So as a lot of the modern SID tracks do. So that's how I kind of get that. That's the filter settings I use anyway. So if we load up, let's add up 7th final. So I can't do anything. It's got a lot of scrolling. You can see you can't do folders, so you end up with lots and lots of repeated. 7th. Look at that. You had one version of that. So what you got in SIDTracker as well is this 4th channel, essentially. It's called the effects pattern. And what this allows you to do, you can see here it says F2. That specifies which channel will control the filter. So any sound can have a filter turned on or off, but only one of those channels will be setting the filter type, high pass, band pass, slow pass, cut off and so on. And any other channel that's using filter will be affected by that same setting. So since you've only got one global filter setting, and you have to specify which channel is the master, which is kind of unique to the way SID works. What else we got here? So if I go to index 2, play that. You can see all the way down the effects channel. It's doing a lot of changes between the channel which is doing the filter, between channel 3, channel 1, channel 2, and each one is using it for different reasons and so on. So when it's making a high pitched sound, it's because it wants the sync or ring mod probably from channel 3. Yeah, sync. So you'll see in the second channel that the filter, the light at the top of the channels, the red light comes on when the filter is enabled. So you can see in the middle channel that when the hi-hat comes along, that's when the filter. So yeah, it's all about the filter. Lots of changes in that master, as I said. For this song especially, I've used sync for the bass to really thicken it up. Some multiple channels come in to thicken that bass sound when needed, and this weird blip sound as well, which is quite a bit craft worky type thing, wherever that is. Not there. There. So that's instrument 15, I believe. Yeah. So there's quite a lot going on that instrument. If you have a look. No filter. You can tell by the bottom line there the filter is off. But if we look in the wave table, so it starts off with a couple of frames worth of white noise. Again, basically half a frame each one of these waveform settings. If it's running at 4 times speed, it would take 4 of those to do a normal speed waveform change, if you see what I mean. Hence the granularity of running at 4 times the speed. You do more waveform changes within the shortest period of time. So it starts off with a bit of white noise, has a bit of percussion at the start. Then you've got 4 frames where it's doing triangle waveform, which is doing a high. The pitch is right at the very top, pick pending down, which gives you that sort of blippy, craftworky type sound maybe. And then it ends just with using pulse square wave, and that's then using the pulse modulation settings that you'll see in the middle of the screen here on the left hand side. So yeah, that's kind of trying to get a lot out of one bass sound there. So yes, what else can we look at? Another thing I've done before is double up on bass sounds. If we look at second, you may know that I don't have a very good imagination when it comes to naming songs. So second, there we go. So that's just the middle channel. That's kind of the standard bass line. But as you can tell, I have more than one bass line. So yeah, I use multiple channels to get to thicken up the bass. So the middle channel is quite boring. It's just a pulse waveform. And then instrument 7 is also playing alongside it, which has a filter turned on. But it's also using the waveform, which is a mixture of triangle and pulse, and it also has ring mod turned on as well. So it's kind of doing a lot, so when I'm playing both, get kind of a a bit old school, that song, really, because you end up with drums that sound kind of how I finished writing music back in the early 90s. So I was kind of, when I wrote this one, I hadn't really realised there was a scene and what everyone else was doing or what was possible. So I just want to kind of a bit of ring mod, snares and bass all in one channel, bass drum. So yeah, I mean, you can obviously get away with doing mod for basses and things like that. It does take 2 channels up, makes things sound a bit different. We can't get away with it for everything. What else? Yeah, so if we have another look at TDK, it's kind of interesting, maybe. Let's call it that one, probably. I've got a list of various indexes I've made to try to prepare for this, believe it or not. So, where were we on that one before? So what's going on there? What is going on there? It's filters and so on. So yeah, I'm actually putting the usual sort of thing of doing the bass line. A bit of white noise at the start. Anything there? So if I look at that wavetable, there you go. Three updates of white noise, and then straight into the pulse wave. You can tell that there's a filter on that, and if we look at the filter, it's actually in 2 parts as well. Again, you can see the number at the top there, 3. So that's the number of frames, 3 frames of high and band pass. And after that, it just goes into sort of low pass and band pass cutoff. So what I'm doing there is putting a high pass on that white noise at the start, so it doesn't sound as harsh, and also got full resonance. So a lot of the time when you have that sort of sound, you're getting a lot of it from the actual resonance of the filter, rather than the white noise itself, which is quite useful. If I show you another instrument, let's have a look at the hi-hat. That's exactly what I mean. You don't get that with so that's how I get my hi-hats. Again, what you got there is white noise playing at the highest pitch, and all we got is max resonance, high pass filter, and you can hear it coming through. So you can kind of a useful little technique to get things to sound a bit more realistic. Again, it uses the filter, so you have to kind of know when you can use it. If you're using a filter on a lead or something, you don't get that luxury. But bringing them into the song in various places is kind of useful. Adds a bit of sparkle to it. As we're on about percussion, we might as well continue. Let's look at the clap sound. So this one's deceptively simple. It's not using any filters, it's on one channel. Lots of people thought that maybe I'll do multiple channels for claps and so on. All it is wavetable, and that's it. There you go, that's all it is. All you're doing is playing white noise and then playing nothing. White noise, nothing, white noise, nothing. And at the end, those three channels are the same. I could do that with one like that. And that just keeps it sort of playing a little bit longer, fades out due to the release. So if I increase the release, obviously 9 a bit too much, 8 is the sweet spot. So yeah, that's the clap sound. Very, very simple but effective. As for bass drums, a lot of the tracks I don't really use bass drums anymore by themselves. I end up thinking they're a bit of a waste of a channel, so I kind of mix them in with other things. Let's have a look at 10th. So I think 10th is kind of a useful one for this. So what we got there, if we start soloing some channels out. Don't know if that's the best example actually. Let's go back to another one. Let's do Turrican. That'll be the easiest way. Too many songs. Give 5 seconds. Let's go for Rise of the Machine. See if we can find something there. I haven't planned this, so now it goes wholly wrong. Amateurish. All of a sudden. Yep, nothing there. So, if you look there, all on one channel. So, what I've got there is I normally mix my bass drum in with my bass sound, so instrument 32 in this case. Turn to the bottom. So, again, got the wavetable at the start, bit of white noise, and all of this here, basically the whole thing there is the bass sound, bass drum sound, and at the very end, again, it's just going to be playing the bass note, impulse, waveform, but all of that before that is the bass, it's the kick drum essentially. So what I end up with is more than one bass sound. I have one which has got the bass drum in it. In that case it's instrument 32, I think 15 is that. That's again the same thing really, apart from just the one without the bass drum in it. And then 3 snare, of course. Snare, there's a snare, all this is the same I presume, they can all go over the top, yep, there. So that's the snare. I don't do any of that fluttering around at the end, change between white noise and stuff, it just sounds a bit too fake to me. So just keep it as a single white noise pitch at the end. So nothing great there, but it just works very well in the overall track. So yeah, basically, and then I've got percussion, bass line, drums, everything all in one channel. It feeds up 2 more channels for everything else. I did it in a tom then as well, just for fun. So that kind of gives you an idea of how I do that sort of thing. As I said, toms and stuff I'm never really convinced about. They always sound a bit, I don't know, dated somehow. Which isn't always a bad thing. It's like in some songs it's great to have that nod back to the past. Not only does it kind of make some of the tracks you work on sound a bit more up to date as well, because you can get that, you can definitely tell that difference between the two. And it also reminds people that yeah, it's chip music, it's meant to be fun, so to speak. Let me see actually, if I can load in Sanxion. Let's have a look at the remix of it, Sanxion. That's quite an interesting one. So step 64 maybe. Again, yes, I have got some of these written down. So let's unmute some stuff, would help. So here it goes, from like the updated version, and then I wrote a passage using all the original instruments that I recreated in SIDTracker, just to try and give you that a sense that it's the history of where the song's come from, but also to try and show sort of the polish of the updated version, maybe. So yeah, that's kind of the idea. It shows, the greatness of the original, but also you can definitely then feel like you're hearing something different when it kicks back into the updated version. And yeah, I understand anyone who says they still prefer the original. It's difficult not to. So yeah, what else? Channel use maybe. How to know what to put on what channels. Bit of a who knows. I mean, I can try and explain some bits, but again, a lot of it's more luck than anything else. So this song was one I did for the project Hubbard. I converted one of Rob's pieces of music over to SID for him. Obviously it was a lot of to and fro, him telling me what was right and wrong and how close I got it to what he would have done, and how he would attempt it if he was back in that day when he was really in his element of doing this stuff. As you probably know from the whole project, he actually really pulled it out of the bag anyway and could easily have done everything that I did to help out. But I was kind of there just as a, making sure that the project was on track, and if there was anything that Rob didn't feel comfortable doing, then I kind of helped out. So this one, so I was kind of writing it in a Rob style and therefore trying to use the channels like he might do. So, he just still does everything by typing everything in the hex. Literally an assembly, no editor at all. Crazy. And because of that, it's kind of quite rigid on how the channels are used. You have one for bass, one for melody, one for drums. And his weird and wonderful use of ring mod and so on. So if we look at, I don't know, this one, let's try. Start there. It's just kind of a useful one to investigate. So again, some kind of ARP chords, I think they're just octave ARPs anyway. And on another channel, so very Rob, it's basically no bass drums. A lot of the early Rob stuff didn't have bass drums either. It was all based around the snare to keep the thing flowing well on that side of things. So yeah, that's kind of how things used to work. It still does, but you do get that when I see gaps in patterns, it makes me, I really want to push things into that. So yeah, I mean, other things that I've done before, if you look at First, which was ironically the first track I wrote, when I started messing around with SIDTracker. So if we look at this one, so a lot slower tempo really as well. Things are scrolling very slowly. I normally do things a lot faster nowadays just to have more gaps between notes to fill in with other things. Again, if you make that tempo choice wrong too early on, you can't really go back and change it without rewriting the song. So I'd rather have a faster tempo and gaps between the notes, so to speak, than everything all crammed together where I don't have that ability to do anything in between. So that's something else I've learned over the years, really. What were we looking at this one for? I can't even remember now. This is kind of, I guess, a bit more when I ended playing around with SID music back in the late 80s, early 90s. I think the last thing I did must have been for Super Off-Road Racer, something like that. But it was this kind of the Maniacs and Noise style, I guess, of how to separate your channels. Let's see what we got here anyway. So yeah, you can tell you've got your bass drum and your harp chords interleaved. On this channel, I presume, is the bass line and the bass drum. Snare. Yeah, bass line and snare, sorry. So that's very, of its time. But at the time as well, it was just like, wow, that's how you can make things sound like it's doing a lot more. I remember when I heard things like Cybernoid and Stormlord and so on, I realised how you could interleave the channels to get that sort of effect. Obviously then it leaves one channel for the melody. So yeah, that's kind of, it's still a way to work, but it's still very much thinking rigidly about those three channels having a purpose. One is for bass line and snare, one is kick drum and harp chords, and the other is for melody, and that's kind of a formula that works, but it does kind of sound of its time, really. I guess the thing that I've kind of got used to more is feeling that the channels themselves aren't separate, and I see it more as one big, it's like the Matrix, I guess. I see it all as one pattern, and if there's gaps in one, I can maybe put the bass line over to another channel if I need to fill in a gap. So this one, for example, I think Ninth was my attempt not to use harp chords. That was one of the big things. So the whole thing was based around. Let's try and find a good bit. Again. Yeah, and I'll explain how I did that stutter later on as well. Basically just lots of changes to the master volume, so I don't really have to explain it later. But yeah, worked quite well. Let's try and find it. So what we got going on this bit. So that's kind of something I mean, I guess. Here I've got the lead that's also got the clap sound in it. And then so here I've got the snare and a bit of the bass, more of a higher octave bass sound. There's some filtering that's been kicked off as well. And that one's got yet another kind of snare sound, which when you add into the main snare you end up with I don't know, something a bit more interesting. So yeah, that's it. So yeah, basically just trying to keep away from the the standard way of separating tunes. You end up with stuff that kind of flows into different channels and works together as one rather than three individual tracks, I guess. Let's have a look at a few more examples of that. Maybe again, I've written down a few things which I thought might be quite useful. Doesn't mean they are at all, so bear with me. Don't know if this is the one we just had actually. Yeah, so there's things like this where I think hold a seventh. This one is that I tried to write without. I think I did write without any ARP chords. The whole thing. I want to try something that didn't sound like SID. So the whole point was to have real kind of sounding drums and chords that weren't, using arpeggiated sounds and so on. So I'll take out the lead. Again, you've got the clap in there, you've got a little hi-hat that's going on this high-end bass sort of sound, and also one of the two notes of the chords. When you put the other note in, so there I've got the kick drum on the same instrument again as the bass line, so you get the bass at the same time as the kick, and then the higher note of the two note chord coming in. We'll discuss the lead sound probably later on this one. What else? Let's have a look at Mutants. That might be quite another one that had something that I thought might be useful. If anyone knows, I did a remix of remake of Mutants in the same way as I did with Sanxion. What have I got here? So this is really about pushing channels again. So first channel, first index here, first start of the song. It's one channel. That's one on one channel. Put it on the other one. Play it together. You get that great Fred Gray sound. And then what do? Something else I want to say. That's right, I've got a 13, index 13. So basically you're still only using two channels. So they look like a index 0, index 1. That the whole track was, those two channels were busy, yeah? Nothing else you can really fit in there. But if you go down to index 13, managed to kind of fit in a bass line as well. So in there you can hear the snare, clap sound I think was there, bass line, and there's still bits of that original melody, so it still comes through. And that's kind of another thing I try and do, is to make it feel like it's some sort of sidechain compression, that the fact that some things disappear is just really because something else is louder within the mix, so to speak. you can get away with kind of taking bits of things out when you're playing something else, as long as you can kind of bring it in wherever possible as well. So. And all the time then, still only 2 channels taken up, which as I said before, it gives you that opportunity to then just keep bringing more and more things in, where people think when they're listening back you've already used all 3 channels. It's kind of nice to then shock them with a whole melody or lead line over the top or something like that, where you haven't even touched one of the channels. I find if I try and spread things over 3 channels and then bring it back, you kind of notice then that you've taken things out. So trying to... it somehow just sounds a bit obvious that you've had to remove stuff to replace it with a melody line, so to speak. Whereas if you can try and make the most of it out of 2 channels in the first place, then you can always just go, oh, and there's another channel I forgot I had, and add them, as if it doesn't matter, and add another melody line in over the top as well. So yeah, it's kind of a useful one. What else have we got that I could show you? Probably it for that one. Again, maybe Turrican might be useful. The original Turrican rather than the... Turrican SoundCloud version. So if we go to... That's actually included in SIDTracker, this track, by the way. So thanks to Chris Huelsbeck for letting me release this with the program. Also thanks to Dan Larson, obviously, for writing such a brilliant tool in the first place. There's a little bit of free publicity. Finally, he says, you've mentioned me in that damn project. Go buy it. So that's doing quite a lot there. What we got? So again, at that point you've got your bass line, your kick drum and your snare all in one channel. Let's go there. So the whole channel was, one channel was just making that sound. So we might talk about that a bit later on. And these 2, and that bass channel as well is doing half of a chord. Yeah, so you couldn't hear it before because the filter's enabled on instrument 22, I believe. So if you go down here, if I turn the filter off, you'll hear. So there, here on that channel you've got your bass line, your kick drum, your snare, and half of the chord. Two channel chord playing. So quite a lot happening in that one. I knew there was a reason to show that. If we go to channel 13 maybe, index 13, sorry, might be quite useful. What am I doing here? Oh, the ducker thing, yeah, so this is kind of it's just to do with that sound actually, I believe. So we've got that sound that's normally running through the whole track in Turrican, using up a whole channel. But what you can do, as I was saying before about taking things out, if people don't notice, you can kind of get away with it. So here for the 2 channel chords that come in, this is another one that I wrote without using any ARP chords. That was the whole thing about trying to get as close to the Amiga as possible. So here, yeah, we have and you can just hear sort of undertones still of that running sort of sequence beep sound all the way through there. So it's just there in between, wherever I can fit it in, just get it back in, and it makes it sound more like you can't hear it because of the chord over the top, rather than because you're cutting things out. Well, that's the general intent anyway. So yeah, it's on that channel. No, nothing interesting. The only thing there that might be slightly interesting is that I had to make sure that I had the higher pitch of the two chords, the actual note that you hear as the melody on the channel that then flowed through, that played past where the other one was cut off, if you see what I mean. I think if you look on channel 2, you've got this 5 here. Is that the snare, I believe? Yeah, clap. That's a clap sound. So if we play it only on channel 2, so that cuts off at that last note of the chord, but on the first channel the higher note, more dominant note of the chord carries on and fades out over the rest of that pattern. So it kind of gives you that impression as well that both things were playing at the same time, even though only one of those two notes was playing for a longer period. So you can kind of, again, fool people into thinking it's doing more channels than it is, for reasons like that as well. I think that's probably enough of Turrican. Yeah, why not? Okay, let's move on to something else, shall we? Don't know really. Let's have a look at Crockett's theme. Did I ever release this? I don't think I did. I did it still. So what we got here? Channel, first channel maybe here. So all that's coming out of one channel. So you're getting the kick drum and the bass, again, that old chestnut, that old trick. And then you've got hi-hats mixed with the bass using the filter technique, so you get that higher pitched, more, I don't know, realistic 909ish, 808 type sounding hi-hat. So that's doing that pattern. If we come down to index 24, play the same thing. Don't know what that's doing differently, anything? Certainly sounds, don't know. Yeah, that's right. So it's kind of the same kind of thing, but then how about this one? We've got now. So again, all on one channel. Try and get the bass drum, percussion, bass line, snares, everything. Frees up 2 more channels, I mean, especially in this song, because it was basically one channel was being used pretty much for arps alone. So yeah, when you've got a song like that, you can't get away really with not having that sustained chord, otherwise you just don't end up with, Crockett's theme. So it was important to start off thinking, okay, one channel was definitely going to be taken with an arp chord. How do I fit a melody and everything else to give it that original sort of feeling. And basically it all comes down to cramming as much as possible into one channel and going from there. Another thing, back to Turrican, I guess. Why is the machine? I was kind of proud about how much I managed to fit in this one. A certain section of it really comes together. If we go to here, it feels like it's already doing a lot, I think. Let's see what's going on. So it's kind of already playing quite a lot of stuff there. And again, the thing about this on the original Crystal for the Amiga, you've got that sustained chord thing. So you've already taken a channel up essentially by having and it's kind of the main part of the song. You can't not have it, because if you take that out, you've lost what the original is. So let's hear again. As you'd expect, on the other channel. So yeah, that's kind of pretty full. It's doing quite a lot. If I come down to this one though, a bit later on in the song, so I've kind of got it added another melody as well. Let's have a look and see how I did that, because I'm not too sure I know myself. To go from 42. So again, it's that first melody you kind of cut into if you need to bring the sort of more dominant melody through. So you can still hear in between those higher that sort of more dominant melody, the older one, but coming through behind it still. But on one channel. Second channel is just doing same thing. Third channel would be, I guess, bass line, blah blah blah. So yeah, it's about trying to get full the grain into making it feel like it's doing more than it actually is. Let's look at one more, shall we? Which one should we go with? Back to TDK, I think. Fast. Oh yes, the name here, Fast. All these fast ones, after I wrote 3 versions of it at a slower tempo, realised I'd made a mistake and had to restart from the beginning at a higher tempo, rewrite the whole thing again. So yeah, as I said, try and get that right from the start, or it's a bit painful. Index 32, I don't know if we already looked at this before or not. Let's see what we got going on here. So yeah, you can probably guess what's going to be happening on the third channel. Creature of Habit. All the same kind of thing. Again, you can tell probably from the bass that it's got that nice sort of hi-hat that's got a filter on it. Gives it a little more sparkle going on. So yeah, it's these 2 channels, like I said there. So yeah, that's where it gets kind of busy. As I said before, might be worth looking down here at 59. Oh yeah, just the one little thing. So as I said about trying to make the space and don't treat channels as individual elements. There, I think I got an extra pattern that I just went, oh, there's a gap that I can put a snare. So if you listen back to the whole thing, you've got that final little snare. And it doesn't come in on the same channel as all the other snares. It's just put, it's over here on the melody. So it just allows the bass line. If I put it on one with the bass line, you would have heard the bass cut off, and it would have been far more obvious if you were using channels. So it's about finding gaps where you can put things to make the piece of music still work, the tune still flow, but without obviously cutting away. Yeah, that's kind of what I've said a few times, I guess, now. But it works. So there. There's also this echo thing. It's kind of interesting, I guess. How am I doing that? I don't know. I could remove the arps and find out, and you'll hear what's still going on in those two channels, I guess. So, if you've got 14, should have been on. So, if I move them to set the attack to full. So you can still hear there's kind of an echo delay effect that I'm adding in to give it more. I think it's doing even more than it is. So the first channel is just, and the second channel it just gives it that little echoey feel. And again, it's kind of makes it blend well from the start when I had enough channels to do the whole sort of proper echo effect. And again, that's just that, but on another channel. Unlike goat track and things like that, you can't set attacks and so on. The envelope on within the track itself. So I've had to create another instrument. Basically, just copy the first instrument, change the attack or whatever to get a quieter sounding version of the lead, and do the pattern again with an offset. Oh, simple stuff. So I've had people ask about instruments, how I create instruments. I don't know, really. A lot of it's, as you can tell, a lot of it's trying to get an instrument to do more than one thing. Just having a single sound as an instrument feels like a bit of a waste. You can always get a bit of percussion in there, something else, give it a bit more movement. What I normally do anyway is copy instruments out from other songs into new ones. If I want something that sounds similar to another song, when I instrument in another song, I just copy the instrument out and tweak it. Likewise, I normally start a new song using the previous song, or one that I wanted it to sound like. So if I created a piece of music after a certain genre of a game, it makes more sense to start off with that as a basis for the new one, to have a lot of the patches set up, a lot of the instruments set up and so on. You can get some good lucky accidents as well, where you start writing a song and it will bleed through into patterns that you've had from the previous song, and it just throws your mind into a different mindset. That can be a good thing to make you suddenly go, wow, I would never have come up with that myself. Sets you in a new direction. Likewise, it might play an old pattern but with updated patches that you've changed, instruments that you've changed around, and it just sounds completely crazy. Or filters will suddenly kick in on a channel that you never had before, set up in that way. And yeah, it really just make you sort of realise that you can do a lot more by luck than judgment sometimes, which is no bad thing. So yeah, let's look at a bit of instruments for a while. If we look at, we're going to go to 7th again. Keep going back to some of the same ones, but there's quite a few good examples, I guess. Let's look at index 30. I think this is the one I said we'd come back to anyway. So that lead. The whole thing is actually only keyed on at the very start. Everything else is using tied notes. You can see here it's instrument 23, and after that it's got a tie on its pitch bending up to G4 from F4. It's got a tie. If I go through the whole song, everything has got a tie. So by doing that, it doesn't reset any of the envelope. It doesn't reset any of the filter settings or the pulse or the wavetable or anything. So it just keeps this whole thing sounding a bit more organic. It just flows a lot better. It's also, looking at the instruments, let's look at 23, why not? So you can tell quite a long release, but I wanted, when it gets to the end of that section, I wanted it to kind of fade out over quite a long time. It only hasn't got anything in the wavetable other than just pulse wave. The pulse wave itself is going from minimum of 104, maximum to 125, so nearly staying around square wave. It's not really moving around too much. And I find that's another thing with pulse waves, it's very easy to say, put really big values on everything, and it all ends up sounding the same. You can kind of, doesn't matter what values you use, you can end up with something, if you modify that pulse width too quickly, just always sounds thick and more suited to a bass, but you kind of lose the subtleties of a decent melody. The vibrato doesn't really exist as much here. I do the whole vibrato stuff within the pattern itself. It gives me the control of saying when I want the vibrato to kick in and also how much. So it sounds a bit more, again, more organic, but more realistic. Like someone is actually playing it, and rather than it always kicking in after a certain amount of milliseconds or whatever. So it gives me the choice to put it where I want. So yeah, that's kind of. Oh, and also high pass filter. That makes a big difference, obviously. I do like using high pass, band pass for leads. Low pass now and again for bass and stuff like that. I'm also one of those people that always seem to put band pass on with either. A lot of times, not in this example, but normally I'd have a band pass with a high pass or a band pass with a low pass. Don't know why, I just prefer the sound. Likewise, I'm kind of a full resonance type of guy as well. Just makes the thing sparkle a bit more, but probably sounds a bit obvious to some people. To some people anyway. Let's have a look at Last Ninja. Why not? Last Ninja. No, it's Last Ninja 2. That'll do. I had 6 versions of this before I finished it. Let's go to 54. What have we got here? Don't know. So this one's a bit more interesting as well. I've got the arps, I believe, of this one. But the arps, you can tell, I've also put percussion on them. It's like I would do normally with bass or whatever. I also put it on the arp sound itself. So if we look at the instrument for 23, a bit of white noise at the start. Why not? And it doesn't loop back to that. You can tell by the top of the arrow is. It only loops back to the arp chord. To get those chords going slow enough, I had to do 4 copies of every note offset. Huge waste. If I could set a delay time for each one, that would have been super. But there you go. But yeah, it gives me a little bit of kind of free percussion as well. So that's got quite a lot going on there as well. It's got the percussion, the arps, and the snare comes in now and again as well. So again, probably fine when I play that with another channel. Let's try that one. So the old trick, there we go, then bass drum, bass line, snare. But then I've got arps with another snare and more percussion. Yeah, and also a hi-hat that comes in, sort of a ride. So yeah, a lot going on those two channels again. Anyway, we're on about leads, weren't we? Why did I want to mention leads here? Possibly an echo effect. There. So it starts off with instrument 25, and then it got a tied note. But then instrument 28 is just a quieter version of 25. Again, I changed the attack, quieted it down a bit or something like that. Probably changed, I don't know what it changed, sustain or something. And yeah, it just makes it feel like there's an echo going on. So there. So again, that's just done with the release of the actual note itself. So that's what it's playing on instrument 28 here. But then you can see on 8, 12, 16, it's doing tied notes, but it's already keyed off. So it's not a continuous note playing, it's already keyed off. So by changing the note, it will still keep fading out using the release rate, so you can kind of get an echo effect that way. So yeah, that's kind of another thing to get a bit more echo type effects going on. What else? I was going to say something about the Turrican stuff again with that channel. Some of the little effects you can do that are quite nice in SIDTracker, to be honest. Where's it going? There. Which one should we look at? Let's look at index 9. That is the one. So yeah, even this sound. So it sounds like it's doing, it's not just a continuous note, that's instrument 15. It would be doing that if it was that's just me playing on the iPad. If it was just a continuous note being keyed on over and over again, it would sound pretty static. But you can tell by, if you look at offset 2 here, 10, 14, it's got this little symbol. And what that is that's the pulse reset, which I've disabled, or enabled, disabled. So basically when it plays the note, it re-keys on everything, the envelope gets re-keyed on, the filter gets reset, everything else if it's using it. But it won't reset anything to do with the pulse width, so it will continue using the same values it had previously. So you kind of get the hit of the attack again of the sound, but a slightly different position of the pulse width. And it kind of gives you a bit more of a, I don't know, sort of an acid bass, if you like. You can get a sort of weird sort of burbly effect going on with the bass line, just because it's playing a different position with the pulse position of where it was doing. And yeah, it gives a bit more movement to that continuous beep that you wouldn't have got otherwise. So yeah, if I just take that out, you'll see what I mean. Boring, isn't it? Whereas I can put some back in, like that. So yeah, another little thing there, just to make things a bit more interesting than they might have been. Let's have a look at Dragonspire. Why not? or as I called it, Dungeon, and it was a game to do with dungeons. Hadn't had a name at the time. So this was a 10-minute track I wrote for that game. What should we look at? Let's go there. So that one's got kind of an interesting, I basically copied Rob Hubbard, to be honest. He had a track called Pygmies, Revenge of the Pygmy or something, that came out. And he just said, oh, what do you think of this? It was amazing when I heard it. And a lot of it was to do with the lead sound. He just had some really kind of over-the-top use of vibrato that just kept kicking in from various notes. That just was just like, oh, that's... Why hadn't nobody else ever done that before in that way? So what I've got here is basically two different instruments it goes between as well, but also one of them has an attack, kind of, the other one doesn't, and then various use of vibrato throughout. So if I mute the other two channels just to hear the melody. It kind of goes, it's a bit over the top, weird and wonderful. And there's also, two different versions of that lead that kind of complement each other. One's far sort of harsher with the attack than the other. So that's kind of something else to do. Use more than one sound for a lead, make it sound interesting. Little tip for you there. What else? What else is there? Oh, let's look at Cosmic Force. This hasn't been released yet. This is still in development, but I've been allowed to show this thing, I think. I called it Shooter again. Didn't have a name at the time. We'll go with Shooter. So, this one has a really long kind of over-the-top, bit Hubbardy type of solo near the end. I've actually added it on at the end. I wrote that whole song and then thought, you know what, it needs something else, so I added this section. But the lead itself, it kind of goes between, shows a number of different things. It has kind of a distortion effect, which I use, again, using sync. It's kind of an obvious one to do, but it also has all those other effects that I've been talking about of tied notes, pitch bends, and so on. So it kind of shows everything in its worst, in its worst possible way, I guess. So if you play it from a bit earlier on, you'll get an idea of what I'm talking about. So yeah, that's kind of a very indulgent, I guess. But if you start looking at it a bit more, you'll see everything I've just talked about before. That was good noise. That was because it uses sync off another channel to give that kind of distortion effect. But before that, you probably saw lots of tied notes, key on at the start, then everything else is just using big long sustained note to keep the sound moving. So that's better. That's with the other channeling to get the sync working on that lead. So the sync kind of resets the waveform based on the pitch of the previous channel. So you kind of, because of that, you get kind of this edgier type sound. It can be used to sound a bit more, yeah, like a distorted guitar or whatever. It's my take on it anyway. So yeah, that sort of thing. Speaking of, I don't know, that sync, let's look at Hybris. So, where is Hybris? How do you spell Hybris? Asking a dyslexic guy how to do anything. 20. So what we got here? So yeah, you got some. This one really shows, I think, the vibrato getting added in afterwards, within the pattern rather than on the instrument itself. Where is it? Who knows? To seconds index 20 should be enough. There we go. Why wasn't that there before? Who knows? It keeps vanishing. So yeah, I wanted that clicky type sound through it. Again, for a bit of kind of distortion-y dirt to the lead sound. So what I did is number 27. It's all to do with that sync again. But you'll see here the sync is only turned on the second. That's the sound. So basically, you've got this looping between the last 4 sections here. There we go. So, looping for the last 4 sections. And only one of those has got sync turned on, so if I turn it off, you just get a normal pulse wave. If you only have one of them turned on, a bit nastier. I could turn more on. That sounds awful. But when it obviously plays, you get. So basically it's been affected by the other channel. Obviously if you have sync turned on, when those claps come in with high pitched white noise, the lead disappears completely. But it just, again, gives it a bit of dirt, resets the waveform, makes it sound a bit more like it's doing something that it shouldn't do when it's a SID. I guess the only other thing really is the old classic pitch bend, slide to a note. Which you kind of have to do if you want it to sound a bit like a SID track anyway. Sometimes you want to make sure you're still giving a nod to what this beast is that you're playing with it. So, Last Ninja 2 remake that I did. And again, melodies on the first channel here. And yeah, lots of pitch bends. I mean, basically always pitch bend, don't always, but you just find it doing a lot of pitch bends from one note to the next. It's very easy with SIDTracker. You've got this auto glide button down on the bottom down on the right hand side, and it will automatically set the pitch bend to the next note it finds. I've actually been adding that into all of the editors that I've been writing ever since, so no guesswork into trying to get the right pitch. It just makes it so easy and so quick. So all you do is you set the 2 notes, press auto glide on the first note, set the second note to be a tie so it doesn't reset it, and yeah, that's all you have to do. So yeah, I mean, that kind of goes without saying, but that's how you kind of get something that sounds, don't know, a bit more polished. It might sound like you've gone to a bit of effort rather than just playing the direct notes. It's easy to overkill it and do too much and find out you put slides all over the place. I don't know if it's true or not, but I guess that if you're a guitarist, you probably do a lot of that stuff naturally when playing a guitar, and you would expect you know when to put them in, whereas us keyboard players with our little pitch bend wheels are probably thinking, now? I don't know. I guess the more you write, the more you kind of get used to when to do it, but sometimes as well, less is more. Doing too much of that sort of thing can sound, like you've kind of got, way over the top, kind of lose track of the actual melody itself. I think we've covered a lot of stuff now. We've done the echo stuff with albino. That was something else I was going to look at. Something else, I guess, 6th. Kind of an interesting echo effect I could show you. Let's have a look at the intro. Is kind of so yeah, you get a nice echo. And that's all pretty much using filter. So you have the release on the instrument that's just going to obviously fade it out over time. But I've got a filter table here, and you can see it's kind of a zigzag. I was a bit lazy doing it, but it worked. And it basically loops around over and over again. So if you imagine you've got a sawtooth filter, so it's going to be resetting over time. So yeah, that's basically it. You kind of get a sort of a free amplitude jump, if you like, increase, but the whole thing is still fading out over time. Of course, that amplitude is going to be affected on any channel that's using a filter. So it's a nice little effect, and it does sound, pretty cool. But yeah, you can kind of, that's all you can use it for. I was going to say about stutter as well. I might as well just look at that one more time. Let's have a look. 9th probably is the best one for that. Yeah, so that was kind of, again, all down to the effects panel. It took a long time to put in, but basically in the effects panel, not only can you set the filter channel to use, you can also set the volume. It's basically default 1.8, so you're setting the volume what you want as well. So you can see here, I'm setting the volume to off to full, to off to full, basically gating it. So if you had a gate, and you can call these patterns up. So just like you do any other pattern, I could change the pattern number. It's down in this final column here in the pattern view, in the track listing. So yeah, so basically you can create a bunch of different gate effects and then trigger it. There was one problem with that is when I tried to run it on a real C64, the player didn't work 100%. I had to go in and hack the player to try and get the volumes to change at the right time. I think I'm changing it like a couple of frames too late than when the sound was getting keyed on. So I basically went in and modified the player until it worked, forced it into submission. So if you were going to do that and release a track, be warned that you might have to hack around in the player. But basically, yeah, you can So there's probably other ways you could do it. You could have used filters and had multiple tracks using the filter turned on, and then mess around with the filter cutoff in similar kind of ways. But this was a nice little effect to get something that sounded, again, different from what I'd heard everyone else. The thing about doing the volume, obviously, is that all the instruments are still playing as they were. You're literally cutting the volume on or off. So it's kind of the propagate effect rather than any sort of pretend use by having multiple instruments and different attacks or whatever. I don't know, however you might want to do it. But it worked for me. Yeah, that's probably it. I think we're just about done. How else do I do stuff? What else can I say? Not a lot. I normally write the track, but I'll start with a good idea, I hope. I don't start with the intro and work through to the end. I'll start off with what I consider maybe a chorus, if you want to use that sort of terminology. Write the chorus first, get a hook, get something that sounds good, then add something before that comes into that part, and then add something after that, and then go, oh, I can repeat that again. And I basically block out a track. So at that point, you can easily get up to 3-4 minutes of just blocking out, saying, well, I can repeat that, but now I want to break in that section. And just by listening to it over and over again, you start getting an idea of what you'd expect to happen next. At that point, that's when I'd normally add an intro and an outro, because I know what the track's going to be doing anywhere. It might be that there's a good part in the middle, and I can say, oh, that would be a really little motif to have at the start of the track, so I can then use that and build up, knowing that I've already got it later on and how it fits in. And likewise, the outro, I can normally be quite lazy and just do a version of the intro that kind of goes the other way, fades it out, but has that same sort of journey that's taking you through to the end. If the track's looping, obviously you might not need to have one at all. But there you go. And then I normally listen to it over and over again and over a number of days. And as I showed you at the start of this, if I haven't used all the patterns up by then, I might go around and say, well, I could add a few little snare rolls. So I'll make a copy of the pattern that is there to a new pattern, add some extra snares or whatever, and it gives it that extra, little bit of polish here and there. So yeah, at that point, I'm kind of just playing around, playing with volumes, setting sustain levels to try and make instruments mix better. Quite often you have a lead sound, especially, you can go, wow, that's brilliant, and you realise we'll be listening to it a few days later, the mix is awful. You've had it on far too high for far too long. So you go back with fresh ears, tweak some volumes. Again, maybe even rip out whole sections. I've done it before. I've had a section which really didn't work, and it's only when you come back with fresh ears that you go, yeah, just lose that. I'd rather have a shorter track that works well than something that's, 8 minutes, but 2 minutes of it are rubbish. So take stuff out. Yeah. And listen to it on real hardware if you can. Or get Max Hall, one of my good friends, to do it for you. Getting feedback, knowing what sounds good on a real hardware is important if you want to release stuff. Especially things like sync. SIDTracker's good, but it's not perfect in emulation. I have noticed before where, especially with using the sync, it might sound fine on SIDTracker, but you'll get high-pitched blips going off when you listen to it on the 64. Where maybe the white noise channel or whatever, the high-pitched percussion is going to cause a channel that uses sync to suddenly have a really high-pitched beep for a couple of frames. Catching them and fixing that can make the difference between having something that sounds great on final hardware and something that you really wish you hadn't released. So yeah, worth doing if you can. I've noticed as well you can pick up those sort of differences in things like Vice as well. So even if you haven't got real hardware, it's worth trying out. Thank you for indulging me. I'll try and edit this down to something usable. Hopefully if you're watching it, it's because it was worth our effort. Thanks very much everyone. Bye bye.